Hey folks, this is Christopher Poe. I'm putting together a QuickTime Player screenshot video for you here. I would like to share one of my data collection methods that I'm using while I research for my book, Toll the Liberty Bell. For those of you that know me, or even those that don't, I'm a novice historian, even less of a novice writer, and this is my first attempt at writing a historical fiction novel. I've chosen to write about the period just prior to the American Revolution, leading up to April 1775. So in doing that, another thing you'll if you know me at all is I have a hard time remembering dates and names. That takes practice. That is a skill, and being a novice historian, it's not one that you do not want to practice. So I'm always looking for new and creative ways to actually visually put information in front of my face so that I can view it and use that information. And I also have a feeling that the more you see it, the more you'll learn it. So in saying all that, let me tell you what I'm currently doing. I've chosen this book, Framingham, an American Town, as one of my resources. Framingham is the town in western Metro West Boston, Massachusetts, where my book is set. It's also the town that I live in. I've chosen this book because it was published by the Framingham Historical Society. It gives you a good broad-based overview of the birth of Framingham. It even goes beyond the American Revolution. But for the period that I'm interested in, it really does give me a lot of really good, juicy bits of information. Now, I'll say this. I didn't anticipate at first really revisiting the period of the birth of Massachusetts, for example, in the early 1620s and 30s. But as I read the book, it reminded me that people in the 1740s, 50s, 60s, and 70s would have definitely had ancestors, relatives, grandparents, great-grandparents that would have remembered those mid-1600 periods. So it was good that I was able to read that. Now, in saying all that, here's what the book did for me. Because I decided to go ahead and include a research period back as far as 1630, I went ahead and listed in an Excel spreadsheet 1630 to 1775. And then as I came across names of people in the book, I went ahead and just simply plotted them. So in this case, this individual here, his name's Thomas Danforth. He basically could be considered the father of the town of Framingham. So he does predate my graph. He was 12 years old here in 1634, and he emigrated from England to Massachusetts. So I plotted him, and I use these yellow dots as events, and every time you see one of those, I will also list some sort of comment there. And then throughout the book, in chapters later, obviously these prominent individuals, or these folks that sort of long endured, come up again. So you just sort of keep adding those events, and then saying, well, if he's a member of the Court of Assistants in 1660 and he was 12 years old in 1634, I know he lived between those dates. So you go ahead and add that stretch of his lifespan, and then you go ahead and you just carry on. Well, you can see how many people are sort of scattered throughout this book. So it was really this method really worked for me in that as I built families, these would be the family names here on the left, sometimes you didn't see that family name until 30 pages later with some descendant of the original. And so I would just insert a new line and add that person in there. So you can see here I have this Dr. Ebenezer Hemingway, who's a relative to the former Hemingways. So I have not made the genealogical connection. I know that this is the Framingham Hemingway family, and this is a descendant in some way. That's what I did. It gave me a really neat perspective on the people that lived amongst each other at certain periods of time. So the further I went down the line towards the period that I'm interested in, which is the 1760s and 70s, you can see how things start getting a little bit more active. Whoops, sliding a little bit too far with the movie video here. You can see the people that would have known each other, and as I scroll down that list, I can actually insert these people in their own real historical perspective into my book. And then I started adding these symbols and things for different types of people. What you're seeing here is the Salem witch trials and folks that were participants in that. Here you have Tituba, and I used a symbol for slaves as I came across several slaves that are relevant to Framingham, including one Crispus Attucks, if you're familiar with your Boston Massacre history. And he was from Framingham. Didn't know that until I read this book. So anyway, there it is. And now as you sort of zoom out, you get this really neat sort of topography or a data map of the birth of an American town and the families that sort of long endured down in this region here versus the ones that sort of stopped moving along. And it gives you just sort of a really neat perspective. Let me know if you found this useful. Let me know if you can think of ways to improve it. Let me know if you think there's a better way to do things than going about it this way. I'd really be interested to know. All right, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks.